this is what we have currently for the scene, which is a player, and as I touch the door will open and I can go inside. Cool. So what I'd like to do is add a pickup in here that I can get, which is like a key. So the way that keys work is they're really just another trigger that as soon as you touch that trigger, the key itself goes away. Now, there's another part of it, which is that kind of like in the PowerPoint, where the key itself needs to be tracked that I actually have one. So we're going to do that next after we set up the pickup. And this pickup, the way that we're setting it up, is actually very similar to how we're going to set up bullets once we get to that point too. So it's all kind of using the same idea. So I have these Playmaker objects that I'm going to add. I added them to Zool. You can just drag this objects folder. You can also download this off the Playmaker website. So it creates this objects folder, and thankfully they have this little key card thing. So there's a little key card. And it can actually be a key itself. Props to anyone that can make the big key from Zelda and put it in there. Put the material for the key in there. And every good power-up spins, right? So it's very simple to make this thing spin. Literally all you do is add a Playmaker FSM, and you only have to add one thing. There's a couple of actions you can use, but really there's already an action called rotate that you can just use. And rotate is very nice, lets you just rotate something. I'm going to have it rotate 180 degrees. And have it rotate 180 degrees every second. And that means that now when I play, with just that change, and I go in here, here's my little Playmaker spinning guy. This is my key card. So what I'd like to do is set up a trigger so when I touch it, the key card goes away. And it's just like any other trigger that we set up. So I'm going to add a cube. I'm going to parent the cube to the key card. And just going to reset this thing. And I'm just going to scale it to be a little bit more in line with the size of the key. That. And I'm going to set it to be a trigger. Let's just move it down. Just big enough so that when you actually walk over the key, it actually picks it up. So we're going to add, oh, and I also am going to rename this thing to be GameObject_key. So to the trigger, I'm going to add another FSM, just like what we just did for the door. It's almost going to be identical. Waiting for player. Got another state that says picked up. And go to the events and say player touched key is the name of the event. We're going to add a trigger event. Send the player touch key. And add that as a transition here. And the difference here is that instead of doing anything like an iTween, we're just going to destroy an object. And the object we're going to destroy is this key itself. So I'm just going to drag that key in there. And just to make sure that it's actually doing something, I'm also going to play a sound at the same time. I'm going to do it before the object gets destroyed. Unfortunately, there's no sounds here, so let's import in, let's just make a sound. Cool. That'll be good. Export that to desktop. Go here, grab the sound, bring it into Playmaker. I'm going to make a folder for it called audio. Drag that into here. Go back here, click on the keycard trigger, and the sound I'm going to play is this coin. Okay. And that's all it takes to get a power up. And that what we just did is pretty much exactly how we're going to do bullets. Oh, and that's right, there's no audio in my Playmaker for some reason. I think it actually has to do with the fact that I changed what audio device is playing. Let's just save this. I'm going to reopen the project. I'm going to actually close down Unity and reopen it. So that's one thing. We have a key that goes away when we pick it up. But I actually want more than that. I want to have a door that is considered locked when I walk up to it, and I need this key to actually get past, right? Let's hope this thing plays audio. There we go. So let's make another set of doors. This time, I'm actually going to duplicate this door. Let's just duplicate all this stuff. So in fact, I'm just going to group this whole thing into basically an empty object that's a room. Call this geo_room. I'm just going to grab them all and put them all in there. So I'm going to grab this, these cubes here. I'm just going to parent them all to this room here. So now I have this room. So you see all that stuff is together in one. And then I could just take this room and duplicate the thing and drag it, and spin it around 180 degrees. And the only difference is that here, this door, I'm going to treat it a little differently. First of all, let's put another material on it. Let's put, it could be red, sure. Or yellow. So that's going to act as our locked door. So right now, the default behavior for this door that's behind me is I can walk up to it and it rotates, right? So it opens. But I don't want that. I actually want the behavior to be that it requires a key in order to open. So here's the first case where Playmaker gets a little bit more involved. Now we can actually change the behavior of Playmaker based on a variable. And I talked about variables last week, and we basically used one variable, which was a vector3. But I also mentioned the bool variable. You guys remember what a bool was? Basically true or false. And we talked about what kinds of things could be bools, like whether you're alive or dead, or whether you're crouching or not, whether you're in the air or not, whether you have a key or not, right? So we can use a bool to track whether we have a key or not. And what's nice about Playmaker is that it gives you a very easy way to make that. So normally, when you add a variable, you'd be like, oh, well, let me go to the variables tab here. Like this is my key trigger. Go to variables, and let me add a bool for like has a key, right? This seems pretty reasonable. But here's the point of the PowerPoint. Before, it's where does this variable live right now? Does anyone know where this variable is living? Like who did I just add this variable to? What do I have? Well, I have the trigger selected right now for the key.
Yeah, but when it has the object, doesn't it have to attach to the player?
We could set it up that way. That's more complicated. But the way that we actually want to set it up is that right now, where does the variable live? Like that's actually the question.
Whatever object you made it in.
Right. It's on the trigger. It's on the key right now. You guys can't really see it. But this variable actually lives on the trigger that belongs to the key. What happens to this trigger when I pick up the key? It gets destroyed, right? So like watch, this object in the hierarchy view on the left, if I go in here and I pick it up, that key is gone. In fact, the variable I just added is also gone, right? It doesn't exist anymore. So I added a variable. Problem is that if I want this door to only open if I have the key, and the only way I can tell if I have the key is if I can see a variable, but the variable got destroyed, now I have a problem. Where do I put this variable?
Global.
You can put it on the door, and we're going to do that later. However, what's nice is that this thing, everyone kind of cares about whether you have a key or not. Maybe, what if you had like a thing on the HUD, kind of like Zelda, where it showed you how many keys you have? Well, maybe the door and the player care about the key. So in this case here, we can put this variable in a location that lives basically forever. So instead of putting it here, I'm going to click this global variables. And this is a special pane. It doesn't matter what script you're on. You literally can be anywhere. You click this button, it always goes to the same place. This is a global list. You can think of this being like the cloud, or basically something that is persistent across your entire game. Click on this list. These global variables exist everywhere. So now if I had put has a key, I'm going to add it as a bool. It's going to give you this little dialog that says, hey, you have this asset, which is your global variables. This thing is actually shareable across multiple levels. Only now that I have this global variable, and I click this variable here, right here, the global variable, even after I pick up the key, it still exists. So there it is. So that's the thing, is that this global variables dialog shows me all the variables that I can write to and read from. Okay? So here's what we're going to do, is in the trigger for the key, we're already playing a sound, we're already destroying the object, but I'd also like to set a variable. And it's just the way that you set variables. Like, so if you guys remember when we set up the controller before, let's just make an empty object here. Just to give a little bit of a recap on how we used variables before. There's my sphere, right? We had done this thing where I made an FSM, and I had a single state in here, which was get axis vector. You guys remember this from last week? We stored the axis vector in a variable that we made called like input. So now we stored it here. And remember I said debug it so you can see it. So now when I play, you guys should be able to see this vector thing changing as I rotate. So see how this number changes? So this action is taking care of setting the variable for us, but we can always set it ourselves. So for instance, I'm going to delete the sphere. When I'm in the trigger, right before I destroy the object, I can add a new action. And you're going to set a variable, and the variable you're going to set is a bool value. Bool value is just set some variable I know exists to true or false. Okay, so I'm going to add that, and just put it right here. And so now in this drop-down box, I see none, and then there's a little side menu that says globals. And this globals is basically you can read and write to it from any FSM anywhere in your game. So any FSM can read or write to this variable, which means I can set has a key to true. Okay. The only downside to using global variables is it's very hard to tell what that variable is set to normally. So we're going to do the next step here as well. But we're just going to go here and see if we can find a way to preview it. So here we go. Here's my variables. The dialog goes away because the object got destroyed, but the variable's still here. And you can see here, it actually is true right now. Let's see if I can actually show it changing. Look at this dialog right here on the bottom where it says false. Right. I have to keep all these windows open. Okay, let's move that out of the way, this out of the way, and there it is, false right now. So once I pick up the key, notice it changed to true, right? Nothing that crazy, it just says now this thing is true. Now that variable knows whether I have a key or not. And that's important because this door, this yellow door over here, I want to set it up so that it can tell whether I have the key. And remember, this is how our trigger acts right now. So let me click on the yellow door. I'm actually going to rename this door because, again, it's just door right now. But instead, what I'm going to do is call it GameObject_locked door. So check out the trigger on this locked door. Just waits and it opens, right? So how do we change what this door does based on whether I have a variable or not? Well, let's talk about the state machine first. So let's dive a little bit deeper into what the state machine is doing. It's waiting for a player, and as soon as a player enters, it goes into the open door state. But what do I want to do instead? What does the state machine kind of look like in this case, if I have a locked door? Kind of think back to the vending machine, right? You think about the state machine for a vending machine. The first thing that does is waiting for money. But if you put in money, it has to check that you have enough money to buy what you want, right? So there's this is a very simple one. This is almost too simple, right? Like it's kind of just doing one thing and it says, oh, go ahead and open right away. How do we change this state machine to have it check to see if we have a key? What do we need to do here's a trick. We need to have it go into another state. What if this state is called does player have key? Right? What if we just have it go here first? Open door. So now, what does this look like when we draw it, right? Hopefully I have it. Somewhere here I have it. I'm using the magnifier, dear God save me. Maybe I don't need a magnifier. This thing is never helpful almost. Just because it's like way too big. Okay, here we go. That's a little better because I'm going to draw. What should that state machine look like, right? I have a wire from here to here. What if the player has the key? What should happen? Where should it go? Where is my line going to go?
Open door.
Open door, right? That's one. I'm missing another line though. What if the player doesn't have the key? Goes back to here, right? That's what a state machine should kind of look like. Only now we have two possible exits out of this. This one this wire here, you're going to follow it if the player has the key. This one does not have key, right? So how do we get those wires in Playmaker? How do any transitions work in Playmaker? Like we have one already here. Player enter trigger. That's an example of a transition, right? So in this case, we actually are going to need, can you guys see the green? It's kind of hard. We're actually going to need two transitions. One for player has key, right? It's going to go from here all the way down. And another one for player does not have key. Okay. That's basically what our state machine looks like, right? Does that make sense? Like this is kind of like you have this weird behavior where now I have a state that changes what it does based on whether they have a key or not. Questions so far? It's kind of weird. Like how does this actually work? So basically, I'm waiting for a player. I go in here. And before I leave this, I have to figure out whether the player has a key or not. And depending on which one of those things is true, I either go back to waiting for the player again, or I open the door. Those are the two possibilities for this thing. Just like a vending machine, if I put in $1, it's either I have enough money or I don't, right? Let me use a vending machine as an example again. So I'm going to do this over here. A vending machine has kind of three possible states. One is waiting for money. Does he check if you have enough? And then the final state is get your noms, and the other one is wait for more money. So the way that this works is that, let's just add some events to make this a little bit more clear. Not enough money. Okay, so let's set up this FSM just as if it was a vending machine. So I'm going to put in some money. So I'm going to check it to see if I have enough. If I have enough money, then you're going to get your noms. Otherwise, you don't have enough money, so you go back. Right, so that's our state machine. And to draw it more like what we were doing here, so that's basically kind of what we're trying to replicate, right? A vending machine is waiting for some money. You put in some money, which causes you to go here, which then checks, hey, did you put in enough at all? If you don't have enough money, then you go and wait for more. Otherwise, you get your noms. And there you go. That's your vending machine. Does that make sense to everyone? Sorry if I'm spending a lot of time on this because it's actually the first time we've done more than one transition. Okay. Because in reality, in Playmaker, you can have any number of transitions. Right? You could have any number of states all over the place, and each one of these things could have a transition to something else. And these things could have transitions to other states. And it can get really kind of crazy from this point on. But you start off kind of simple. You turn into this like octopus looking thing. So eventually we'll get to states that look kind of like this. But for now, we're going to keep it simple and get rid of all that. Instead, we're going to keep it to this point here. So now that I talked about that, let's add some states. So player touch triggers 1. Another event I'm going to add is player has key. Another one is player does not have key. Okay? So let's set up those transitions. The player touch the trigger, which checks to see if the player have the key. In the player has the key, we're going to add 2 transitions out. Either he has the key or he does not. If he has the key, go ahead and open the door. If he doesn't, then go back to waiting for the trigger. Okay? That's what our events look like. So here we go. We're waiting for the player. If we go waiting for a player, we're going to go here, and then we're going to wait to figure out what to do. So let's just run and see what happens in this case. Let's keep this going. So this is my regular door. The door still opens. Now let's go to the yellow door and watch the state transition here. Now I'm in here. So here I am in this state, but I don't have any actions yet. And this state is the one that determines what I'm going to do next. So we have to add some behavior here to figure out where to go. And thankfully, Playmaker has an action that lets us do that. So the action you're going to use is called a bool test. Lets you test against a bool variable and do something based on the value of that. So in this case, bool test has a few arguments. One is, which variable do you want to look at? The variable we want to look at is this thing here, has a key. And if it's true, we can say, hey, fire the player has key event. Otherwise, player does not have key. And that's it. So now, everything should work. So now if I walk up to the door and try to open it, you should see the state. So watch the state transition. It'll go from here to here and then back here again. Every time I touch the trigger, so every time I hit that yellow door, it's going to do that really fast. But now if I go here and I pick up this key and I go back to this door, now it's in here. So the door actually opens. Okay. All right. So I want you guys all to set that up. So there's labs 3 and 4. And then there's a little bit of extra work where I'd like you to have it like play a sound in the state when you don't have the key. Kind of like what happens if you ever try to open a chest but you don't have the key for it. So labs 3 and 4 I want you to do now. You can actually take a break and take a half-hour break, come back, and then we'll finish up the labs. And then I'll give you guys your homework. Okay. All right, that's it.